Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. Chapter 8 The Potions Master. There, look. Where? Next to tall kid with the red hair, wearing the glass. Did you see his face? Did you see his scar? Whisper followed Harry for the moment he left in dormitory the next day. People lining up outside classroom stood on tiptoe to get a look of him, or double back to pass him the corridors again, staring. Harry wished they wouldn't, because he was trying to concentrate on finding his way to classes. There were 142 staircases at Hogwarts, wide, sweeping ones, narrow, rickety ones, some that led somewhere different on a Friday, some with a vanishing step halfway up that you had to remember to jump. Then there were doors that wouldn't open unless you asked politely or tickled them in exactly the right place, and doors that weren't really doors at all, but solid walls just pretending. It was also very hard to remember where anything was, because it all seemed to move around a lot. The people in the forties kept going to visit each other, and Harry was sure the coats of armors could walk. The ghosts didn't help either. It was always a nasty shock when one of them glided suddenly through a door you were trying to open. Nearly Headless Nick was always happy to point new Gryffindors in the right direction, but Pift the Poltergeist was worth 2 locks door and trick staircase if you met him when you were late for class. He would drop weight paper basket on your head, pull rocks from under your feet, pelt you with bits of chalk, or sneak up behind you invisible, grab your nose and stretch. Got your conch? Even worse, the briefs. What was impossible was the caretaker, August Filch. Harry and Ron managed to get, unluckily, turned out to the entrance of the out-of-bounds corridor on the third floor. He wouldn't believe they were lost, and sure, they were trying to break into it. Suppose was the threatening to lock them in the dungeons when they were rescued by Professor Quirrell, who was passing. Filch on a cat called Mrs. Norris, a scrawny, dust-colored creature with belonging lamp-like eyes, just like Filch's. She patrolled the corridors alone, break a rule in front of her, put just one toe out of line, and she'll whisk out for Filch, who'd appear, whizzing 2 seconds later. Filch knew this secret passway the school better than anyone except perhaps the Weasley twins, and could pop up as soon as any of the ghosts. The students all hated him, and it was the dearest ambition many to give Mrs. Norris a good kick. And then, once you had managed to find them, there were the class themselves. There was a lot more to magic, as Harry quickly found out, than waving your wand and saying a few funny words. They had to study the night skies through their telescope every Wednesday at midnight and learn names of different stars and the movements of the planets. There times a week they went out to the greenhouse behind the castle to study herbology with a dumb little witch called Professor Sprout. where they learned how to take care of the strange plants and fungi and found out that they were used for. Easily the most boring class was History of Magic, which was the only one taught by a ghost. Professor Binns had been very old in it when he fell asleep in front of the step from fire and got up next morning to teach, leave his body behind him. Binns journeyed and on while they scribbled down names and dates, and God's a miracle the able and Uric the oddball mixed up. Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher, was a tiny little twin wizard who had to stand down a pile of books to see over his desk. At the start of the first class, he took the roll call, and then he reached Harry's name. He gave an excited squeak and toppled out of sight. Professor McGonagall was again different. Harry had been quiet, tried to think she wasn't a teacher of a class. Strict and clever, she gave them a talking to the moment they sat down in her first class. Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts. She said, anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. You have been warned. Then she changed her desk into a pig and back again. They were all very impressed and couldn't wait to get started, but soon realized they weren't going to be changing the furniture into animals for a long time. After taking a lot of complicated notes, they were each given a match and started trying to turn into a needle. By the end of the class, only Hermione Granger had made any difference to her match. Professor McGonagall showed the class how it had gone, all silver and pointy and grave, gave Hermione a rare smile. The class everyone had really been looking forward to the defense against the dark arts, but Quirrell's lesson turned out a bit of joke. His classroom smells strongly of garlic, which everyone said was the word of a vampire he'd met in Romania and was afraid would be coming back to get him one of these days. His turban he held him had been given to him by an African friend as a thank you for getting rid of troublesome zombie, but they weren't sure they believed the story. For one thing, the Seamus Finnegan asked eagerly to hear how Quirrell had fought off zombies. Quirrell went pink and started talking about the weathers. For another, they had noticed that a funny smell hung around the turban, and the Weasley twins insist that it was stuffed full of garlic as well, so that Quirrell was protected wherever he went. Harry was very relieved to find out that he wasn't miles behind everyone else. Lots of people had come from Muggle families and liked him. Hadn't had any idea that they were witches and wizards. There was so much to learn that even people like Ron didn't have much of a head start. Friday was an important day for Harry and Ron. They finally managed to find their way down to the Great Hall for breakfast without getting lost once. What have we got today? Harry asked Ron as he poured sugar to his porridge. Double potions with Slytherins, said Ron. Snape had of Slytherin house. They say he always favored them. We'll be able to see if it's true. Which McGonagall's favours us, said Harry. Professor McGonagall was head of Gryffindor House, but it hadn't stopped her giving them a huge pile of homework the day before. Just then a mail arrived. Harry had gotten used by this now, but it given him a bit of shock on the first morning, where about 100 owls were suddenly streamed into the great hall during breakfast, circling the table until they saw their honours and dropping letters and packages on their laps. Hedwig hadn't brought Harry anything so far. She sometimes flew to nibble his ear and have a bit of toast before going off to sleep in the owlery which had other school owls. This morning, however, she fluttered down between a marmalade and a sugar bowl and dropped a note on Harry's plate. Harry tore it open once. It said in a untidy scroll, "Dear Harry, I know you get Friday afternoon off, so would you like to come on have a cup of tea with me around here? I want to hear about your first week. Send us an answer back with Hagrid." He borrowed Ron's scribbles, "Yes, please, see you later," on the back of the note, and sent Hedwig off again. It was lucky that Harry had a tea with Hagrid to look forward to, because the potion lesson turned out to be the worst thing that had happened to him so far. At the third term banquet, Harry had gotten his idea that Professor Snape disliked him. By the end of the first potion lesson, he knew he'd been wrong. Snape didn't dislike Harry. He hated him. Potion lesson took place down in one of the huge dungeons. It was colder here than up in the main castle, and would have been quite creepy enough without the pickled animal rotting in glass jars all around the walls. Snape, like Flitwick, started the class by taking a roll call, and like Flitwick, he passed the Harry's name. "Ah, yeah," he said softly. "Harry Potter. Our news already." Draco Malfoy and his friends Craven Goyle snickered behind their hands. Snape finished calling the names and looked up at the class. His eyes were black like Hagrid's, but they had none of Hagrid's warmth. They were cold and empty and made you think of their kernels. "You are here to learn the subtitle science and extract of potion making," he began. He spoke in barely more than a whisper, but they cut every word, like Professor McGonagall. Snape had the gift of keeping class science without effort. As there is foolish wand waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. I don't expect you really understand the beauty of softly smearing cauldron with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of wicked liquids that crave through human veins, betwitch the mind, incission the sense. I can teach you how to bottle fame, burglary, and even stop death. If you aren't a bunch of dilettantes, as I usually have to teach." More silence followed this little speech. Harry and Ron exchanged looks with raised eyebrows. Hermione Granger was on the edge of her seat and looked desperate to start proving that she wasn't a dunderhead. "Potter," said Snape suddenly, "what if I add powder root to a spittle on the infusion of wormwood?" "Powdered roots of what? An infusion of what?" Harry glanced at Ron, who looked as stumbled as he was. Hermione's hand shot out into the air.